Yeah, I was playing with these anchored VWAPs from the low of 2019, the high of 2019, the all-time high, and where's my fourth one? Oh, and that anchored VWAP right before we dumped all the way down to the low of 2019. And sadly, we were below all four of them. But now we're finally starting to bounce above. Which one is this? I think this is the dump before from 6K down to 3K. It's the only anchored VWAP we're above. So it's getting a little scary.
Yeah, definitely. I'll share my kind of analysis on Bitcoin just with the anchored volume by price. But yeah, there's not a ton of kind of demand zone until 5,500 since since the buying started at the pivot at the bottom. So I'll kind of go over that a little bit. Because that's something that's really unique is being able to anchor that volume by price is really nice.
Yeah, I've been
Like,
using it with the anchored VWAP as well, and it kind of gives you like so like one of the indicators that I use typically is a 3-day VWAP, and it has like your VWAP, and then it has your standard deviation bands, and it kind of acts like the anchored VWAP kind of acts as that 3-day VWAP, but forever how long you're using it.
mm-hmm.
I need to pull up the volume price. Let's see. We're gonna get started here in a few minutes, guys. We're gonna start off by talking a little bit about Bitcoin and some stocks. If you guys want us to do any analysis, just feel free to put the tickers in chat, and we'll get to them. Yeah, if you take the anchored volume profile from the low of 2019, we're basically in a really big gap from like 5,000 all the way up to like 78 to 8,000.
Mm-hmm.
And we kind of wicked down into it and then bounced right out of it, which is pretty bullish when you bounce out of gaps like that, but pretty ugly.
Yeah, definitely. I think caught a lot of people by surprise. I thought that last big spike was the next leg up. Not so much.
Yeah, I was talking about that on stream, how that last move up, it really sucked because it gave so many perfect good short signals, but um, because it was such a volatile move up, you really didn't want to short that. And that's what I told my stream is I would love to short here, but this was the fourth largest move in Bitcoin history, so shorting this is not a very good idea. But then in hindsight, turned out to be a fantastic idea. And then it nuked all the way down to 6K. So it was almost like a, what is that? Almost a 40% drop, 30% drop.
Whew. That's a drop and a half, all right. Yeah, I did a little trade on Twitter today. Oh wow, closed up, closed up today, huh? Or closed up for sure, but it did rip down to
You had a massive gap.
40s.
What's going on, Vin Diesel? Yeah, I was looking at an anchored VWAP. I like taking dojis that kind of line up with my doji system. Um, and I found this doji on June 28th that I took an anchored VWAP from. And it was a beautiful anchored VWAP on Twitter. And then as soon as you lost it, you retested it. And that's when Twitter nuked. It went from 41 all the way down to 29. But
That was
sadly, I didn't trade that. So
I uh I was being a dumb trader and just completely was way over bullish on the options, but I did have a strangle. And I one of my calls was up like 6 or 700, or my put was up 700%, but then I lost on the calls like and I had too many calls to outweigh the loss.
Yeah, I'm still decently new to options, so I'm only doing like sometimes I'll do like naked calls where I'll just take a call. A lot of times I'll do spreads, but I'm still fairly new, so I don't know much.
Yeah, I don't trade them a ton either. I just kind of trade them like I would a stock. I just swing like the longer term ones, so I don't have to worry about day trading them and then getting killed by the theta and all
Yeah.
that.
Diesel, you said, do you have any active trades? Yeah, so I'm currently pretty long on Bitcoin. I'm considering these longs my spot buys. So I sold the majority of my crypto holdings way back when Bitcoin was at about 13,000, so around 12.7 was my average, I believe. I sold a little bit higher, a little bit lower, but my overall average ended up being 12.7. I'm starting just now to build those holdings back up. I started buying a little too early though. I started buying around 7,500, which I can kind of show here on a chart. Let's see. My Opera doesn't like TrendSpider for some reason because Opera is a pain. I've been meaning to switch platforms because my Opera's been giving me so many issues lately.
What is it?
Opera browser. I
Okay.
switched to it a while back and it actually seemed like it was a lot faster and everything was doing well. And then recently it's just been killing all my programs. It's been crashing and I don't know what's going on.
You got a nice little volume spike here.
But yeah, Diesel. So I started buying around like 75-ish, which was back on this little dump here. The reason I started buying was it started bouncing off this doji back here. And it also was triggering buy signals on a couple of my indicators. They were kind of short-term buy signals, though they weren't any like long-term buy signals. So I started picking up some of my spot back. What really hurt me was I started adding to my losing position a little too early. So I started adding on that next little dump. So my average ended up being around 75. I tried to add another one final piece down here at what was it, 63.75. I just barely missed it by about $100, and then Bitcoin started to retrace here, as you can see. I'm currently looking at the range drop candles, which we're going to get into here in the Q&A. So my chart might look a little weird to you, but we're starting to see some decent volume coming in on Bitcoin on the daily. You see that range drop has a good amount of volume towards the upper side. You just entered into a short. Yeah, I hedged a little bit here, so I'm currently in a small hedge, but my overall position is still bullish. All right, guys, so what we're going to be doing today, let me send you a link to the tweet if you guys haven't seen it yet. We're going to be going over the TrendSpider platform, answering questions that were posted on our Twitter thread. If you guys haven't already, we're doing a giveaway for this thread. You guys can go ahead and ask some questions. If we have time, we'll get to the late questions probably towards the end. But for right now, we've got a good amount of questions already, and they're actually, you guys surprised me a little bit here. They're actually easy to lay out into a nice video, so it should be a good time for us. But if you guys have any questions, like while we're going over things, you can post them in chat. That's the reason we're doing the live stream. So if we're going over something that doesn't make complete sense to you, just feel free to ask us in chat and we'll elaborate. Did you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yes, yeah. So thank you again for having me on. My name is Jake Wajastik. I'm one of the founding team members of TrendSpider and work with a lot of the partners and really product development, creating new features on TrendSpider. So I'm excited to talk a little bit about the product and the company.
Awesome. So we're gonna get started here, guys, with a question from Max Wellington on Twitter. He asked, aside from the cool raindrop candles and auto trend lines, what separates TrendSpider from the competing chart platforms?
So TrendSpider is really kind of like a, I don't want to say an onion, but there's a lot of different layers to TrendSpider. So at the base, TrendSpider is a charting platform, but you can't really compare it to just any charting platform out there. We have a bunch of different things on top of the charting features, such as the alert system, the back tester. So I would say those two things are really unique. So the thing about the alerts, you can create alerts on some other platforms as well, but ours are completely web based. They're on the cloud, so you don't need to be hooked into anything. As long as you have your email and your phone number set up in your account, you will get the alert anytime that the price action touches anywhere you're looking for. So, without, I don't want, it's kind of hard without kind of showing it visually, which I think we'll go into a little bit. But the alert system does have the ability to define the way the price is reacting with a level rather than just saying, alert me when the price hits $3. It's alert me when the price breaks through this trend line that is upward sloping. So we're kind of tracking all of these things, that the average system does not. So there's a lot of different things. The ability to not have to code when creating conditions or different back tests is also a big thing as well.
Yeah, I was kind of showing off the alerts a little bit on my screen while you were going over it. I can throw it over to your screen if you'd like to show them a little bit more.
Yeah, sure.
You want to go ahead and present on the meeting? I'll pull you up full screen here.
All right. Can you see my screen?
I can, yep.
All right. So let me just go. Let's just do Ethereum. All right. So I'm just going to turn the volume profile off here. Volume by price, excuse me. And let's turn on the weekly Bollinger Band. So this is another feature that's actually very unique to TrendSpider. So we're looking at Ethereum here. We're looking at it kind of catching a bid here, right around 140-ish, depending on if you're looking at the wick or the body here. And one of the really cool things is to overlay multiple time frames on a single chart and then use the alert system even on that. So for example, I personally am going to guess that we're probably near like one of the lower bands on the weekly here. So what I can do is go to daily versus weekly and go to the weekly Bollinger Band. And yep, we're right at the lower band here on the weekly chart. So what you can see here is this is the daily price action, but then you've got the weekly Bollinger Bands overlaid on that price action. And you can see here when we had these turned off, it's kind of, it's, you're kind of asking yourself, why did we bounce here? And if you actually turn on the Bollinger Bands and you can see this longer term price level is being respected by the shorter term price action, the daily price action versus the weekly, it's easier to visualize that without having a ton of different charts open at once.
Yeah, I love that because on other platforms, you have to go into the actual code of the indicators. So if you want to look at a different time frame of your Bollinger Band or moving average, you have to code them to do that, different length or whatnot. But on TrendSpider, you can just pull it up right on the chart.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people who like to code that are traders, but there are a lot of people that aren't coders either, myself included. I've been trading for over 15 years, and I just don't know how to code. It's not my forte. So what we do is we give you the ability to kind of create these complex conditions and these complex visual kind of sets of data without having to crunch numbers and code everything in. What I wanted to mention here is notice how we're catching a bid at the lower band here on the weekly Bollinger Band, and notice how we almost found resistance right at this mid band here. But notice that we did not actually test it. Same thing here. Notice how the price action didn't actually get to this band. But what you can do with TrendSpider is, if we zoom in here, you would actually be able to create an alert and be alerted anytime the price action gets anywhere near this band. So you can see here, when I move this sensitivity to the right, you'll see this purple area gets bigger. So if I had this sensitivity all the way to the right, I would have actually been able to capture whenever the price action was in this area without having the price have to hit that exact precise line. We're now making this rather, a stroke of a pencil more like a stroke of a highlighter. So you're capturing some of that margin of error around that line.
Yeah, I think one of the best things that TrendSpider does is they take things that advanced traders or even like institutional traders or people who have all these different systems like strategy testers and whatnot, and you take all those different features and you make them very easy for the beginner trader to kind of start, like dip their feet in, and then they can kind of build their own systems uh, from those platforms. This
Yep.
next question we had was from Randy Brooks on Twitter. He asked, for a new user, what is the best combination of tools?
So that is
So, like, what
kind of
would you say is if you're just getting onto TrendSpider, you're trying out maybe the trial, you're kind of presented with a lot of stuff at first. What do you think they should start playing with when they first get on TrendSpider?
so if you're a new trader, I would recommend, first getting a general baseline of all of the main kind of basic features that we offer. So trend lines, you want to know what a trend line is to understand what the trends feature is and how to utilize it. So assuming that you know what a trend line is, the trends feature is honestly one of my favorite features to use. And so what you do is you just turn on trends here, and let me turn off logarithmic scale. So you can see here, all of these lines just popped up on the chart. And, you know, at first I used to say, oh man, this is really noisy, right? There's so many lines here. And that's kind of the point, right? You want to have some of that discretion still left in the analysis. So what this is doing is it's highlighting all of these important areas for you, and then you as the user get to choose which lines that you want to lock in. So for me personally, I'm probably going to lock in these two lines right here and then turn the trends off. And that's what I'm going to use. Someone else may, let's say, let me turn these off or remove them real quick. Someone else may pick up this particular pattern here. And that's not wrong. It's just picking up two different trend lines. So everyone's going to have their own discretionary analysis, even if they're using the automated trends. So being able to use the automated trends but still keeping things discretionary is one of my favorite things to do. And the nice thing too is these lines were actually created on November 9th.
I think
So,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
well, I was just going to say, these lines aren't like just drawn. These were all drawn from like a week and a half ago, maybe 2 weeks almost. And so, it's just interesting to see how well the price action is respecting this area, especially right here. And so, if we refresh and lock, now we're actually going to have all the most updated lines. And so, this is what we can kind of now use as our chart, and that type of thing. So I turned it off. Now it's locked in, and I can go about my analysis.
I think the beauty about the automatic trend lines is I talk with this a lot on stream that I don't typically use diagonals like typical trend lines that a lot of traders use because there's so many different ways that a trader can choose which trend lines to draw. Do you draw them from the wicks? Do you draw them from the bodies? Do you take this candle? Do you take that candle? But if you use TrendSpider, it shows you all of the relevant trend lines. You can kind of see that okay, some of these traders are looking at this line, some of the other traders are looking at this line. You can really kind of look at all the trend lines and make your own analysis on which trend lines you think the majority of traders are going to be trading off of. I definitely think the trend lines are one of the systems that new traders should or new people to TrendSpider should definitely start using when they are doing their trial.
Yeah, it kind of gives you a secondary perspective. It's like, oh, I didn't even think about that line. So it's not there to replace what you're doing. It's there to really kind of enhance the whole process of finding lines, but finding them faster, more consistent, and more efficiently.
We got a question here on the live stream. They asked, can you adjust trend lines to cut through wicks, or is it coded wick to wick or body to body?
So you can actually let's say that depending on whatever trend formula you're using. So that's a great question. So you can choose the drawing input wick to wick or body to body. But you'll notice here, if I go to something like, let me find an example here, something like this, this line kind of is goes through a bunch of bodies and a bunch of wicks. And this is more of what we call like a line of best fit. So notice how the price kind of mean reverts around this line. It kind of goes down below it, then it goes up above it, then it reverts back to it. So yes, there are lines that are going to be drawn through bodies and wicks, but there's also going to be settings where you're going to be able to really pick really nice, beautiful lines, like setups like this, where I'm going to draw this kind of megaphone looking setup. Oops, draw right here.
They also asked, can you adjust how trend lines are drawn from? And yeah, you actually have a lot of things you can adjust on these. Could you show off the advanced
Yep.
where you can adjust them? You can play with these a lot, and me and Sticky have actually gone through and kind of tried to find our own settings. I believe Sticky actually has his own settings that he uses. But
Yep. You'll see here the base points are something that are a function of the distance between the candles. So, a base point that is higher, let's say 50, is going to produce less lines. So, for example, when you go to, why do I always do that? Not indicators. When you go to trends here and you go from enhanced to original, you'll see that this base point goes from 10 all the way to 35, and notice how these lines become a little broader and you're finding these bigger trends rather than a bunch of lines all together like you have when you're doing the enhanced, which you're looking at lines that are a lot closer together. Notice how we're finding these closer channels and this like megaphone here, that type of thing.
this is actually a good leadway into our next question. Um, a wild bull on Twitter asked, what is your trend line preference between the three different settings: original, advanced, and standard? Which is your favorite to use?
Honestly, sometimes I'll use all three just to. Sometimes I'll turn on enhanced and I'll say, okay, that's interesting, and then I'll turn on original and I'll see what original's finding. So it's more of like, if you want to think of this as like a filter or a secondary eye. So it's like, let me turn on this filter. Let me turn on this filter. So um, ideally, I like to stick to the enhanced wick to wick, and then I do like to respect
Actually,
that.
before we get into that, could you go over the difference between the three of them?
Yes. So the difference is solely just the base points. So original, enhanced, and standard. As I click original, notice this is going to go from 10 to 35. This is 40. So the actual analysis type is a function of the distance between the candles. The islands or the gaps, that is essentially, you're not going to have it on crypto, but let's say we're going to look at like Tesla or something that has a ton of gaps. Notice here, just remove all drawings here. Notice here that when I change this, and let me update this. So notice here, it's the system's finding one line. That's because we've got a ton of gaps here. So if I go to trends and ignore gaps, the system then, oh, in this case, it's not. Well, the system is not going to always do that, but in some cases, it's just going to completely change it. So let's go to, instead of original, let's do enhanced. That will change it. So here, we're ignoring the gaps. And then here, we're respecting the gaps. And notice how it changes which lines are drawn. So the reason original didn't work is just because original can be really broad sometimes. So when you go to enhanced or standard, you're going to get different lines here when you change it from respect or ignore gaps.
Typically, is an original used for like longer term analysis if you're looking for trend lines that are kind of farther back.
Yeah, that's how I use it.
Hmm.
I generally like to do enhanced because it finds a lot of wedges and kind of symmetrical triangles, ascending triangle, support or resistance,
Yeah, like the
and then
price action patterns.
horizontal.
Hmm.
So that's generally how I'll use it. One thing I wanted to mention here: all the different colors are a function of the formulas on the back end. So all of these different formulas are based on the number of points on the trend line, the number of bounces, the number of touches, all of these different things that make a trend line significant or not. We're taking all of those into account and then putting them into a formula and then ranking them. So right here, if we go to all or unfiltered, this is every single line the system is currently finding based on the formulas that we have right here. Now, as we kind of rank these lines from all or unfiltered to more lines, which is the second filter here, you'll see some of these go away, but there's still quite a few lines. And then finally, most relevant is going to be, the most relevant lines based on these particular preferences. My favorite thing to do a lot of the time is to just go to like original, and this is probably not a great example. And let's go to respect. And so you'll find one line here, but if you go to all or unfiltered, notice how some of these lines, other lines will show up. So maybe you wanted to capture this previous area of support, then acted almost as resistance here. You can kind of lock these lines in and then go back to most relevant and kind of do your thing. Or if you wanted to do, let's do a different, let's do maybe first solar arrays. So for example, here, if I go to standard, apply, notice how we're going to find this really random, like, I guess you could call like an ascending wedge looking thing that you would have never thought of without the assistance here. So, I can lock that in, turn off the trends and go about my day, turn on my indicators. Let's say that I'm using, um, the simple moving average, whatever the case may be, and then kind of start using the other features. So I know one of the questions was, what's how to keep it simple, but there's a lot of ways to keep it simple. You can keep it simple with trend lines. You can keep it simple with just a couple, moving averages like the SMA 20 I like to use, and then I like to use the EMA 50 on top of that. Let's see, where is it? Here it is. And so that's something I'll generally look for. Notice here, whenever the SMA 20 crosses the EMA 50 to the upside, that's something I generally will look for. And soon you'll actually be able to scan for these types of moves. So right now, you can go to create alert, create multi-factor alert. You just do, say, bull cross, add a condition. This is the daily. We're looking for the indicator. SMA 20 has crossed up through the indicator on the daily, and that was the EMA 50. And so without having to do any coding on the back end, anything like that, it's easily in the system, and then the system will watch that for you. One thing I want to mention too, you can back test this. So you can go to test this strategy as an entry. And let's say we want to see, what's the return after 15 candles once this cross has happened. And in this case, the average return is 21%, but that's also because we only had it happen once in the last 13 years.
It's
If
a
we
good.
do this for a different stock, let's say Amazon, you're going to get a completely different reading here. Here, it's negative 11.15%. So you can see here on the chart, these are the times it's happened. Since we're on the daily, notice how the SMA 20 and the EMA 50 haven't crossed in forever, so you're really not going to have many readings here. Maybe if we go to the daily or something, that's going to give us a slightly different reading. We can test that out. See it on the chart. Oh, that's for the
It's a good
daily.
segue into what Sneaky was asking. He was asking what my favorite features are. I play a lot with the strategy tester mainly. So the strategy tester is definitely my number one feature on TrendSpider. I play a lot with the trend lines as well. Like I was saying earlier, I don't typically trade horizontal or diagonal trend lines, but being able to see clusters of trend lines with the algorithm on TrendSpider is definitely very helpful. But besides that, the anchored VWAP and the raindrop candles, which we're going to get into a little bit later here, are definitely a must use if you're on TrendSpider. Because you guys know me, I trade volume weighted average price a lot. Being able to anchor that VWAP from certain candles, for example, my dojis that I typically trade, is extremely valuable. Um, but yeah, the next question on Twitter was from EG Pennies, and he asked basically like what is a what is the best way to track good setups, and um, that's that's a good way if you have a setup. For example, if you like trading, what he was just looking at, the 20 crossing the 50 or whatnot, the best way to track that is using the strategy tester, because you can put in different variables like stop losses, take profits, um, and you can back test it with either a short term back test, or it goes all the way to deep, which is, I believe, what is it, 9,000 candles?
Uh,
Um, 7,000, yeah. So, and you guys have improved the strategy tester a lot recently, where you can see like the price behavior tool on the chart, and you guys can see it shows like your average win, your average loss. One of my favorite pieces about the strategy tester is when you have that equity graph, where it shows your equity, you can see exactly where. I could show it on my screen here for the stream real quick. You can see exactly where the your strategy is entering and exiting a trade. So I'll show you guys real fast once this has been back tested. So like right here, if I go to full screen, if you click this little positions button on the bottom left, it highlights exactly where your strategy is in a trade and when it's exiting a trade. So if I close the equity graph here, you can see that this is a long only strategy that I have, and it caught this entire major move up, and then it closed while price was falling, which is perfect because this is only a long strategy. So I don't want to see this highlighting during the dumps. I only want to see it highlighting during the breakouts. And even though this is losing 76% of the time, this is still a positive. Let me pull up the equity. This is still a positive strategy. So it's still up 4% while Bitcoin is down 30%. So you're able to see exactly what you need to when you're testing a strategy. All your winning trades, losing trades, your average win, average loss, your average return, what's your overall net profit. Um, but yeah, can you talk a little bit about the new features that you added to the strategy tester, like the price behavior tool that shows on the chart? You guys post a lot of pictures on Twitter, showing off like how your strategy is um, going to
yeah,
play out on a chart, and that it's definitely very helpful.
Yeah, that's something I came up with one day watching the Weather Channel. Actually, just looking at hurricanes and how they move and how they have those kind of forecasted cones, very similar to how that works. So let's go and look at, let's say, QQQ. And we will look at, in this case, let's do the monthly chart. And you'll see here, this is just something that I've created before. And it's interesting for those that are saying we're in such a bubble, we're really only 62% or now higher than that, but we're really only about 65% higher than the highs 20 years ago
Hmm.
or 19 and a half. So that's something to keep in mind. But one thing, here is, let me remove volume by price and we'll just do a simple back test on the MACD. So in this case, you can see here that we recently crossed the MACD crossed here on for October, and then November it's continuing up here. And let me just make this a little bigger. And what you can see here is you can see that we recently crossed, and we want to test that out. So all we would do is go to the monthly. We go to condition indicator MACD fast has crossed up through the MACD slow. And so what you can do here is, let's say that we just want to see what's the average return after, you know, 20 candles. So in this case, we can go to test, and the average mean trade return is 25.39%. So you can see every time that has occurred on the chart, this is your entry. And you can see here, this is where the MACD crossed. And so that's why, it says entry here and it says exit here, because this is after 20 candles. So this is just 20 candles after this entry. And so notice, actually, what you can see here now is you can see this cloud that is forming here. So this is actually the statistical kind of measurement of the averages over the in this case, this was 6 positions analyzed over 21 years of data. So this cloud, and if we go to properties here, you'll see there's different properties here. You've got your min max, you've got your 25th percentile, you've got your mean change. So this blue line is just the average return over 20 months. And so you can see that the current price is trading above what the mean trade return is after, 1 month. And then what you can do is, when you turn on min max, this line right here, this top part of the gray cloud, is the biggest move that's ever happened on the back test. So taking into account these 6 positions, the biggest position ever out of these 6 is right here on the chart. So you can see how the current, entry point, this recent MACD cross, we're only 1 month in, so you can't see too much, but you can also see right here that we're actually trading, near the top. So we're actually performing almost near the best performing MACD cross in this back test. So it's a way for you to track, okay, over time, it looks like the Qs are ready to rip way higher based on previous moves when the MACD crossed on the monthly.
Yeah, it's fantastic. We're getting a few questions here in live stream. He asked, um, does it have an algorithm of patterns indicator? I believe you're talking about candlestick patterns. And yes, it does. He can show you right here. There's many different candlestick patterns that you can use on TrendSpider, and it will find them all for you, and it will highlight them on the chart.
So
Um,
something great question. This is something I used the other day. So we do have your typical candlesticks, right? So if you want to look for a hammer, if you want to look for something like that, but let's say that you want to look for, just a simple pattern like 5 red candles in a row, or 4 red candles in a row, or whatever red candles in a row. I was looking at Apple yesterday, and I was looking for 4 red candles here, and you can see I was looking, and I was doing my analysis, and I'm like, all right, well, any time that there was 4 red candles in a row, there was generally a pretty big move afterwards if you're in an uptrend. So this is almost like a flag here, and it was pretty obvious, after today that this was kind of consolidating for the next leg up. So you can look for these types of patterns. You can look for your typical hammer, or you can look for, let's say, a shooting star. You just type in hammer here, turn it on, apply, and you can see anytime that there's a hammer, it will show up. So let me turn off the four red candles here so it's not polluting it. But you'll see anytime there's a hammer, it'll show up on the chart.
Another great thing about that is you can use that in the strategy tester as well.
Yep, exactly. So
So
if
if
you
you,
want
yep,
to backtest that, you just go to condition, candlestick pattern, and type in hammer. And you can test it after X amount of days. You can test it with a stop loss. You can add a script. So let's say your script is simply the condition is maybe the MACD fast crosses the MACD slow. You can make whatever condition as your exit criteria as well. Here.
and then you had another question. Let's see. Are there any data-driven indicators built in of sort? They've got tons of built-in indicators. They're adding more occasionally as well. How many indicators do you guys currently have? Is there a number?
Over 75 right now, I think. Let's see, 76.
76. Yeah.
So yeah, 76 indicators, and that grows, by the month.
And they just added Ichimoku Cloud not too long ago, which they didn't have in the beginning. So if you guys are Ichimoku Cloud traders and you're ever thinking about back testing cloud strategies, which me and Sticky do quite often, that's my main strategy that I show on TrendSpider is an Ichimoku Cloud strategy. So if you guys want to play with that, they have that on there as well. I
Yeah,
believe I got all of your questions. The next question we had from Twitter was on the raindrops. He said, I'm very impressed with your work. I'd like to know how the idea of developing something like raindrop candles came about, and basically what was the process that gave birth to this style of candle. What led you guys to create the raindrop candle?
so we're always looking to innovate. We're looking to create new ways to visualize things. And to be honest, our CTO and our co-founder Russ, he came up with this randomly and kind of threw it at us one day and said, "Oh yeah, check this out. I just created this." And that was back in October of last year. And we kind of were like, okay, that's interesting, but we've got a ton of other stuff on the roadmap. And then one day we were working with one of our partners, and I mentioned, of this type of volume-based candle, and he showed some interest and said, this is something I would definitely look at and possibly use. And so it became, kind of became more of a priority, and that's kind of the way it works in this startup industry kind of environment. Is you listen to what the customer wants, or what influencers in the industry want or like, and it's kind of dictated by that.
For anybody who doesn't know, can you give a quick synopsis of like what the raindrop candle is?
Sure.
I'm kind of showing it off here on my chart a little bit. So you can go ahead and describe like what
It
does the raindrop candle do specifically?
Yep. So let me. This is a great example. Oh man, Apple's looking strong tomorrow, and you know, I'm not advising anything like that, just based on this type of setup. So the raindrop is a volume based candle. We've got Apple right here. We've got the daily chart showing. And the raindrop really has two parts to it, right? So it's got the first part, which looks very similar to a bar chart. So if I turn off the body here, you'll see that each one of these candles has a left side to it and a right side to it. So generally, this is your open on a regular bar chart, and this is your close. However, on a raindrop, this bar on the left-hand side is the volume weighted average price for the first half of the period. On the right-hand side, this is your volume weighted average price for the second half of the period. And so you can see the second layer of this is important because you can see where the volume is flowing and where that volume is aggregated within a particular price range. And then you can see here, for example, when I turn this body opacity up a little bit, you'll see that a lot of the volume during the second half of the day, this volume profile was fully kind of at the top of the range. And that's why the VWAP on this side is higher than this side, because some of this volume was more kind of at the lower part of the day's range. And you had a little bit of volume all the way down here. So it's really there to show how volume's flowing. Um, not only in a particular period of time, but through resistance or support areas. So, for example, you've got, I mentioned the green, but then you've got your red, which is the opposite, where your volume weighted average price for the second half of the period on the right side is lower than the first half. And so that's where it's red. Your blue raindrop is when the both sides are equal to each other, which is a true volume weighted doji that we call it. And you'll see that these will form, and then they'll either be continuation points or they'll be reversal points. So in this case, you can see for Apple as a continuation point, you had your blue raindrop around 256, and within about 9 candles, you ripped to 268. Which, if you're trading options, that's a decent amount of handles to clear in that short of amount of time. Um, and so that's one way to use it. Another way to use it is to see, in this case, notice how, in this particular setup, a lot of the volume today was kind of focused at the top of the range here. So there wasn't a lot of volume at the bottom. A lot of the buyers were kind of absorbing any supply up here that was being sold off. And you can see that bulge of volume here. And so sometimes you'll see this will form before a nice continuation up. So notice here, you've got that kind of kind of bulge forming at the top, and then you've got your continuation up.
Yeah, it's a nice way to see like where the buyers and sellers are kind of battling during the candles, and then you can see kind of which side wins. Like for a good example, on my chart here with Bitcoin, we saw that Bitcoin was kind of failing downward, and then we saw that massive failure out of that support when you had that red raindrop here, when most of the volume was towards the bottom right side. So it's basically saying the second half of that candle, the majority of the sellers came in and you pushed the price down. And then you saw that big failure from like 7,800 all the way down to 6,600. And same thing like he just mentioned, when you see those candles that have the majority of the volume towards the high side on the right, you can see that it tells you that the buyers, they won the battle on the bottom side, pushed price up, and then you have most of that buy volume towards that upper side of that candle, and then look what happens afterwards. You see that massive breakout all the way up to like 10,500. So it gives you a really good indication of where the volume, both buy and sell volume, is coming in, and kind of where which side is winning towards the end of the candle.
Yeah, one thing I want to mention here, SQ, this is a great example. And it's so funny because people will ask, do you make money using TrendSpider? And uh, it's a really subjective question, one. And two, a lot of the time, the biggest reason for messing up a trade is yourself. It's, for example,
Yeah, it's not the platform, not the tools.
I was in a ton of SQ calls for $70 calls uh, on the 15th. And the reason why I did that was because we had just had this balloon breakout. We had all of this volume breaking out of this kind of symmetrical triangle, if you will. And then we had a ton of continuation here, all of that volume aggregating at the top. And, um, you had just, it was just a clear as day that buyers were in control, and that price was going to continue. And I got out the next day. I and that's the thing with trading options. If you can make 20-30% in less than a day, you're not doing too bad.
Yep.
But you know those calls are now hundreds of percent higher. So the point here is you can use these a lot of the time with options. That's something I've really started to play around with these, because you can see how the buyers and the sellers are kind of forming into the end of the day. You can't buy options after hours, really. So, you know, this isn't very helpful. So, what you want to do is you want to look for the daily raindrop and start to watch it like 30 minutes before the close. Because at that point, most of the volume has been kind of, aggregated across the range. The last 30 minutes, you may have a slight move in what the raindrop looks like, but generally, you're going to have an idea of what it's looking like into the next day. And so that's something to keep in mind. It's not you want to look for these setups before the close, because sometimes, like for example here, you gapped up huge and you may have missed some of that move from the previous day.
Yeah, that the current example you're looking at is a really good example of how you had a bunch of like accumulation during the lows. They were kind of volume bouncing off the lower trend line, and then those next couple of candles that break your red line there, just all the buyers are towards the top side of the candle. So you can
Right.
easily see that the buyers won that battle.
Yeah.
And the next question kind of goes into what we were just talking about. It was from a Loba on Twitter. They asked, is the raindrop superior in terms of trading? And then what is the outcome when back tested? So I think that it's really hard to say something is superior in trading because, like he mentioned earlier, there's so many different ways to trade. You can't blame like all your losses or your wins on one specific thing. But if I had to pick a candle in my preference between a normal candle and a raindrop, I would pick the raindrop for sure because it just gives you more information, and there really is no downside to using the raindrops over the regular candles. The only downside would be that if you're like a really book studied on like candlestick patterns, they're slightly harder to see with the raindrops, but you get used to that very quickly.
Honestly, I'm gonna say that you actually sometimes want to use them together.
Yeah.
So this is a cool example here. I'm just gonna highlight this particular candle right here. You'll see it's the same exact candle here on the hollow. And what I'm gonna do is just draw a resistance line that was clearly resistance for about 4 days here after we gapped up. And what you can tell here is with a regular candle, notice, and let me pull this over. Notice how with the regular candle, all you can see here is the wick. You can't necessarily see where that volume was. If
Hmm.
we turn on the volume bars here, sure, you can see that there was a very slight uptick in volume from the previous two candles, but that's, barely an uptick if you want to call it that. But then when you change over to the raindrop, you can see how much of that volume is aggregating at the top. And a lot of people will say, how do you know is how do you know that's buyers versus sellers? Well, you know that there are buyers here because because that's where the price was aggregating. If there was no buyers here, you may see the right
Just
side
fall right back
and
down.
flat
Hmm.
because buyers kind of were aggregated across the entire range. But you can look at this almost like a sponge, right? Let's say you've got a ton of water up here and you've got a dry sponge, which is demand. If you've got that sponge that's really dry, you can soak up a lot of that water without actually, the sponge, you know, kind of letting water out. So that's all of this kind of supply being gulped up by the buyers here. And that's why you've got all of that volume aggregating at this price above the line.
Yeah, you can see the uptick in the VWAP on the right side. You can also see that it's holding above the the level that you have drawn. So that's actually a perfect example because on the candlestick, you would have considered that almost like a swing failure and you would have probably shorted it. But on the raindrop, you see that that's not a swing failure and you actually had a decent amount of volume in that wick towards the upside. And then you had that nice little uptick in the next two candles.
Yep, exactly. And one of my favorites was also the Qs. They did the same exact thing. I think this was the same day, but the Qs, I think, honestly, was a little more textbook. And the same thing, right? We've got a very similar setup on the Qs today. Pretty much everything printed one of those balloon raindrops here, where you can see, a lot of the buyers are in control. don't quote me on this, but if I had to guess, we're probably going to gap up tomorrow just because this is showing how much of the volume was really absorbed at these higher levels. Notice how there wasn't a lot of supply here. And we know there wasn't a lot of supply because there's no volume here. All of that, all of this price, all these prices were transacted at the, at the top of the range. And so we know that even if there were a lot of sellers, buyers were there to absorb that.
Yeah, they're willing to pay a higher price, so you can see that they're kind of pushing the price up. And he was saying earlier about the blue raindrops where you typically have continuations or reversals. Basically, what he's saying is that they're kind of like squeezes. That you have like it's like a battleground candle, basically, like I talk about on stream. And you can see a perfect example there when you have that blue raindrop in the middle, and you have that massive failure downward because they were battling at that high, and they just were not able to break above that high. You can see the next few candles, even the secondary retest like 3 candles away, the buyers are just not able to get above that blue doji. So you have that perfect reversal pattern down to the lows. If you guys are more of advanced traders, if you do typically like order flow trading, you would consider a blue raindrop kind of like a delta squeeze, where you have the buyers and the sellers are just battling and you don't see a whole lot of buyer delta or seller delta. And you typically would see a delta squeeze when you have like a large influx of volume, but no real winning side. And that's kind of what the dojis, the blue dojis indicate.
Yep. Here's another example of one of those balloon raindrops. You've got nice balloon raindrop right through this resistance, and then you've got your nice gap up. So this is something you want to look for like the last 10, 20 minutes of trading. If you're an options trader and you want to just look for a quick gap up play, definitely look for these types of plays because it doesn't happen every time. There's no indicator that is 100% or anything like that. Um, but sometimes you will have a really nice continuation with these. Notice here, this is a great case study on no continuation. So we've got, something right here, and then you've kind of got this kind of pullback for 2 days before gapping to the upside. So it's not always just gonna gap up perfectly. Here's an example here where you had a nice gap up, you had this balloon forming, and then you had a continuation up the next day. So it's just one of those things you want to put in your arsenal with a bunch of other indicators or you know, it's always good to keep it simple, but if you're going to use a bunch of different tools, I recommend, raindrops being in that.
I
Especially
think.
if you
Sorry,
flow.
go ahead.
I was just saying that to see where the volume is flowing, to see where buyers are in control, where sellers are in control is something that you can't see without them.
I think a great combination is if you guys use the anchored VWAP. Basically, what an anchored VWAP is exactly what it sounds. You're anchoring the volume weighted average price to a specific candle. This is very easy to do in TrendSpider. You can just quickly right click on a candle. Like for example, if I want to anchor a VWAP towards the all-time high, or not the all-time high, the high of 2019 here, you just right click, create alpha trends anchored VWAP, and this gives you that anchored VWAP from that point in time that you anchor it. And you can see exactly where we failed on Bitcoin was right on that anchored VWAP here. And I love to do this with just my doji system. So if you guys are familiar with my doji system, I like looking for dojis that lead to impulse moves. And you can do this very easily on the raindrop candles because you can see kind of where the distribution or accumulation is. And you can just grab one of these candles, anchor a VWAP, and it will show you exactly what that average price is from that point in time. So if you take like the most important times that we've had in Bitcoin recently, so let's say like the anchored VWAP of 2019. Let me grab this one here. You can take the anchored VWAP from the failure back in 2018, and then you could take the anchored VWAP from the all-time high. And you can see exactly how these raindrops are playing off of these anchored VWAPs. And this is one of my favorite tools to use in combination with the raindrops, or you could use it with the regular candles as well.
Yeah, one thing
Good.
as well, you can anchor, sometimes anchoring from the blue raindrop can give you some like the last 2 blues can be interesting.
Hmm. Yeah, so let me show you guys here what he means. I'll go ahead and get rid of these other anchored VWAPs. So if you see these blue dojis here, you could go ahead and right-click these, create Alpha Trends Anchored VWAP. You can see once you lost this VWAP of that last doji, that's when price really started to lose its strength, and you completely failed there. You were trying to distribute a little bit above that anchored VWAP, but once you lost that, you had one last little swing failure, and then you nuked downward. So if you grabbed like the last 2 anchored VWAPs, you can see the same exact thing. Once you lost those 2 blue dojis, it was donezo. But yeah, so for our final few questions here, I had one from Sticky. He asked about your plans for broker integration moving forward.
Yes, we definitely hope to integrate, not a ton at once. It's going to kind of be one by one once we first get that available on the back end. But our vision is to really be able to just plug in where whatever broker you're using, you don't have to use TrendSpider's data. You're just using the broker data that you're plugged into. You can make trades directly through there and kind of make the whole process more efficient. So you're not having to use TrendSpider, then go to a different website to actually place the order. All of that will be integrated in one. And hopefully that will be something we're really kind of starting to integrate more in, I'd say, June, July of next year.
Awesome. Another question was from Paradigm. He asked, "What are the biggest roadblocks in front of TrendSpider?"
I would say a few things. One, just having the customer understanding what TrendSpider is and how it can be valuable to them. So we spend a lot of time educating customers on how to utilize a lot of these features that they may have never seen before, and really on top of that, just scaling. Right, we're still a startup. We're still very early in the process, and so being able to kind of get more resources, kind of over time, being able to scale into the international markets, that type of thing. That will also be something that will be kind of a fun next step.
Yeah, I think it's great that TrendSpider offers so many different advanced features, but that's definitely a roadblock. Like you're saying, you have to teach people how to use those different features, but once they learn how to use them, it's a done deal. It's really easy. Um, but that's definitely a roadblock is teaching the education part of it. But yeah,
Yep.
that's basically all we have. I think I had one last question in stream here. They asked about you currently don't accept PayPal for your payments. Do you guys have a are you guys looking to accept PayPal in the future for?
Yes.
Okay.
We don't have a set date on that, anything like that, but it's something that we don't get a ton of requests, but it is something that we know uh, not everybody has a credit card, and there's other ways to pay. So as we scale and as we kind of grow the payment sources or payment ways that you can kind of get an account will expand.
Awesome. And yeah, so that's it for the questions. I heard you guys were doing a massive Black Friday deal. Do you want to go ahead and talk about that a little bit?
Yes, we are. So from today until the 2nd of December, we're doing 40% off annual subscriptions, 25% off monthly subscriptions. So if you're interested or have been interested in checking it out, this is definitely the time to lock in those cheaper prices. We do have the free trial as well, so you can try it before you buy and still lock that in. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us at hello@trendspider.com, or you can reach out to us on social media, and we're very responsive there as well. And we'll try to get anything that you have as far as a concern or a question answered as quick as possible.
Could you go ahead and shout out what your Twitter handle is? Is it just TrendSpider?
At Trend Spider. So TrendSpider.
Awesome. And yeah, guys, I linked my referral code if you guys want to support the stream and check out TrendSpider at the same time. Feel free to use that link, and you guys can get linked directly to their website and check out their Black Friday deals. But all right, guys, that's all we have. If you guys have any final questions, feel free to put them in chat, and we'll get to them. But if not, appreciate you guys being here. As always, if you guys missed this live stream, this will be posted on YouTube and on Twitch for the entire VOD. So if you guys want to watch it and speed it up a little bit or whatever, you can do that. If you guys like the content, please feel free to hit that follow button on Twitch or that subscribe button on YouTube. For the giveaways, if you guys participated in this Q&A on Twitter, we will be giving away, so myself, I will be giving away access to our Discord community. TrendSpider will be giving away 6 months of their TrendSpider Premium, plus a $25 Amazon gift card. We'll probably be doing those offline on Twitter, which would probably be the easiest way to do it. And we will be contacting you guys via DM on Twitter for whoever wins the different giveaways. Are you planning on giving away the $25 gift card and the 6-month premium to the same person or two separate people?
I need to confirm on the back end for that one, but I think probably two separate people.
Okay, awesome. So you guys will probably have 3 separate opportunities to win because I will be also giving away access to our Discord. So if you guys posted a question, I really appreciate you guys engaging with our Q&A here. We'll probably be doing some stuff in the future just like this. And also, if you guys haven't already, check out my 24-hour trading event that will be going on December 1st, which is a Sunday for me. It's going to be 12 p.m. Eastern, and TrendSpider will also be joining us during that 24-hour session. So we're going to do another little walkthrough, probably talk about some different features on TrendSpider during that live stream as well. So check that out if you guys haven't already. But yeah, did you have any final things you wanted to say?
I just want to thank you again for having me on. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to reach out. If you do kind of, want to see some of the features in action, you can check us out on social, as I mentioned, at TrendSpider. But we do like to post a bunch of charts in the evening, stocks, crypto, forex, all of the above. So you can kind of see real time how this can be used to your advantage.
Yeah, they do a lot of chart requests. So if you guys follow them on Twitter, if you guys ever wanted some things charted, they typically post a chart request and you can ask for a ticker and then they chart them up for you. It's pretty good. But yeah, it's a pleasure having you. Appreciate you guys stopping by. I'll definitely see you guys again on December 1st. So we'll see what you guys have in store for then. All right. Appreciate you guys watching. I will be streaming tomorrow around the same time, 3 to 4 p.m. Eastern. Back to our normal schedule. But yeah, guys, appreciate you guys being here. Like I said, if you guys posted a question on Twitter, we will be doing those giveaways later today. Just make sure you guys keep an eye on your direct messages. And if they're not open already, go ahead and open them up. So if you do win, we can contact you with the details. All right, guys, appreciate you guys watching. See you guys later.
So yeah.